করে যাচ্ছে। Yeah. This is the last talk. We were talking about the art of living yesterday. I think we ought to go much more into it. Most of us have given very little thought to that. We have hardly inquired into the nature of what life is and how to live it. Our daily life, with all its ugly turmoil, passing pleasures, and great deal of entertainment, both religious and otherwise. We've gone, we have studied almost all the academic subjects, spent years to become a doctor, a surgeon, or an engineer. And the engineer never asks how. He has studied perhaps 5 or 6 years, has learned a great deal of information, stresses, strains, and the material, and so on. He never asks how to build a bridge, because that's his job. But we, ordinary people like us, we're always asking how. How am I to live a life without any conflict, without any of the problems that are involved in our daily unfortunate lives? We're always striving, reaching out, getting somewhere. And when a question, a challenge is put before you, like, is it possible to live a life in which there is no problem, in which there is no conflict? When you hear that question, you say, yes, sounds good, but tell me how to do it. What is the method, what is the system, so that we can live a life of great tranquility, great inward sense of wonder, a sense of great beauty. Then we say, tell me how. I think we ought to banish from our minds, not in the academic subjects, but in the psychological world, we should never ask, if one may most respectfully point out, how. Never ask anybody how. They only can offer you a system, a method, which then becomes another bondage, another trap in which you are caught. So we ought to, this evening, go into this question. We have talked about wars. We've talked about human beings psychologically hurt from their childhood, hurt by their parents, by their schools, colleges and universities, by their families and so on. We are wounded people. And that wound inevitably breeds fear. We talked about fear a great deal. And we also talked about time. Not only the chronological time by the watch, but also time as a psychological means of achievement. I am this, but I will be that. I am violent, I will one day be non-violent. This constant becoming from what is to what should be is also the element of time. Because time is very important for us. Not only the physical time to get from here to there, but also the ideal which thought has invented. To achieve an ideal also requires a time. So we are bound to time. And writers and some other people have asked, is there an end to time? Is there a stop to time? And as we said yesterday and during all the other talks here, we are sharing this together. This is not, I will repeat it 10 times, this is not a lecture. Please kindly pay attention to that. This is not in any way to inform, to instruct about various academic subjects, which is what lecture is. But this is a conversation between you and the speaker. A conversation about life, about the extraordinary complexity of life, the great sense of travail, anxiety, desperate loneliness, and the innumerable tears that human beings have shed, wanting to be loved and never finding it. Or if one loves you, there's always the danger and the pain of his leaving. We've talked about all this. And if some of us, perhaps few, even 10, were really serious, in the sense, honest, an honesty that is unshakable, an integrity that can never be broken under any circumstances. And if there were such people, few at least, then we could bring about a radical change in society. We talked about society. Society is what we are. We have made this society, this ugly, brutal, venomous. You know what this modern society is. We are responsible for it, each one of us. And to bring about a radical, fundamental mutation in the structure and the nature of society, we have to undergo a tremendous examination into ourselves, not theoretical, not problematical or philosophical, but to see what actually we are. And face that fact, not escape from it, go into it very deeply. And then perhaps a few of us could really bring about a different culture. And as we said yesterday, for at least this evening, let us be serious, honest. That is, the world is not the thing. The explanation is not the actual. The description of a mountain, however beautiful put, writing a great poem about a mountain in the blue sky and the lovely shadows. All those descriptions in the painting is not the actual mountain. But most of us are satisfied with the description, with the explanation. And then we make of that explanation into an ideal, and then strive to live up to that ideal, which then again becomes a series of conflicts. We went into all this in the last few years, and the last 2 talks, or 3 talks here. So please, kindly remember that you and the speaker are investigating together, deeply, seriously, and with great honesty, how to live a life which is really a great art. So let's begin to inquire more. Humility is necessary, isn't it? To learn. Humility, not humbleness. Not a sense of remote acceptance, but one needs a great deal of humility to learn. But most of us have not that quality of humility. Not to somebody whom you respect. That's not humility. That's merely acceptance of authority. and you worship the authority. You saw what is happening this morning. So, humility is one of the factors in life. Not arrogance, not vanity. A man who knows a great deal, that gives him a sense of self-importance. And he's a vain man, man who has achieved a position, a status, power, money. And then that vanity tries to become humility. Don't you know all this? And humility is not born out of vanity. Humility is necessary to understand the extraordinary complexity of living. And humility with freedom. We think we are all very free to do what we want to do, what we want, our desire, to fulfill our desire. This is one of the structures of society. Each one of us is free to do exactly what he wants to do. Right? You're all doing that. You want to be rich, you want to express yourself, you want to have your own particular way. You're very strong on your opinions, your conclusions. You're free to choose. And we call this freedom. And if you observe what that freedom has done in the world, brought about great confusion, brought about havoc in the world, each one expressing his own particular desire, competitive. And we call this freedom. So we ought to inquire, what is freedom? Please ask this question of yourself. Is freedom a matter of choice? You're free to choose, free to go from here to there, free to have different kinds of jobs. If you don't like one, you go to the other. Freedom to express yourself, free to think what you want and to express it, perhaps in democratic society, not in the totalitarian states. There freedom is denied. So what is freedom? Well, that's part of our life. As we talked yesterday, death is part of our life. The living and the dying. We went into it very carefully. Whether that two, death, life, live together. That requires, as we pointed out yesterday, a great deal of attention, a great deal of inquiry, and great intelligence, how the art of living with death. We talked about it. And in the same way, we have to talk together. What is freedom? Does it really exist? The word freedom also, some of its root meaning is love. And is love a matter of choice? And so we ought to find out for ourselves what is actual freedom. Freedom from something, from pain, from anxiety. Freedom from. And is there freedom, not from something? You understand it? If it is freedom from something, it's merely a reaction. It's like a man in prison saying, I must get out of my prison. We live psychologically in a prison. And when it is painful, ugly, not satisfactory, then we want freedom from that. So we are saying freedom from something is the same thing as being in prison of another kind. Do we meet each other? Or am I talking to myself? So what is freedom? The sense of inward, authentic, deep sense of unshakable freedom. Not from something. What is that freedom? Can we together inquire into it? Not accept what the speaker is saying, because we went into that. If you accept what the speaker is saying, then you are back again to the old pattern of following an authority. The speaker then becomes your guru, and the speaker abhors all gurus. In the world of, if one can use the word spirit or spiritual, authority is a sin. So, together, let's inquire, what is freedom? Probably you never asked that question. We all want to escape from something. I'm lonely, and most people are very, very lonely. They want to escape from it through various forms of entertainment, religious and otherwise. But is there a freedom which is not a reaction? And to find out that, one has to inquire, what is love? Is love a reaction? Is love attraction? whether it be sexual or otherwise. Please ask these questions of yourself to find out the right answer. How do you find the right answer to a question? I ask the question, the speaker asks the question, you naturally reply to that question, if you are at all thinking, going around with the question. Then you respond to that question. Then the speaker then answers to your response. This is real dialogue. Answers to your response. Then you respond to my response. Right? Are you following this little bit? So that there is both question and answer, answer and question. If we maintain this answer, question, question, answer, seriously, intensely, then in that process you disappear and the speaker disappears, only the question remains. You understand? Then that very question has vitality. Don't agree, please. Test it out for yourself. It's like a bud, a rosebud. If the question is left in the air, as it were, then it's like a bud, which gradually unfolds and shows its nature, the response, the depth of that question. It has its own vitality, energy, drive. That is a dialogue. Not just accepting what the other fellow is saying. So you're asking, is freedom not from something? Is it love? And is love a reaction? That is, I see a beautiful woman or a man, or a marvelous statue. I love to have it. I love to hang it on my wall. Look at it day after day. And each time I look at it, it's different. That's a great masterpiece. And for most of us, love perhaps may not exist. Please, I'm just asking this question. I'm not saying it does not exist. For most of us, perhaps, we don't know what it is. We know attraction. We know tenderness. We know pity. We know guilt, remorse, and jealousy. Is all. The crows make an awful lot of noise, I'm sorry. Is all that love? You understand my question? If it is not love, then love has no reaction. Then that is freedom. Yes? Which is not born out of reaction. You may be a Christian and being intellectual, you might become a Buddhist. You have chosen, you are free to become a Buddhist. Because Buddhism is much more intellectually active, interesting. It's got great depth and all the rest of it. And you are free from one and trapped in the other. And you may love the Buddha, rejecting your own particular deity. And this is called freedom. The crows are free. This is very important to understand, not intellectually, not verbally, but the depth and the beauty of it. And we also should ask, when we are talking about the art of living, what is beauty? The great art of cathedrals of Europe, the great temples and the mosques of the world, constructed by great architects, great painters, the great sculptors, Michelangelo. When you see all that, that's beautiful. So is beauty man-made? Please exercise your brains to find out. A tiger is not man-made. No. A tree in a solitary, in a field alone, solitary, with all the dignity of a marvelous old tree. That's not man-made. But the moment you paint that tree, it's man-made. And you admire. Go to museums to see that tree painted by great artists. So, in our life, which is part of the art of living, is to understand the depth and the beauty of freedom and the goodness of it. And beauty. Not the picture, the poem, the marvelous writer. But what is beauty? A beautiful man, a beautiful woman, a face that has depth. And without that aesthetic quality in life, which is born of sensitivity, which is born out of all the senses in action, not one particular or two or three senses, but the whole movement of the senses. Surely, beauty is when the self is not. When I am not, beauty is. When the self is not, lovely. This is. And so, love, freedom, goodness, beauty are one, not something separate, not something pursued. One pursues what is beauty and spends the rest of your life on that. But they're all interrelated. Goodness. That word, though it's very old-fashioned, that very word has an extraordinary depth to that word. To feel the depth of goodness. And that can only be when there is freedom, when there is love, beauty. And we ought to also talk over together this extraordinary problem, as we dealt with yesterday, about death and suffering. We ought to inquire together, what is religion? Because it's part of our life. And to find out what is true religion, not all this phony stuff that's going on in the world. Sorry if you're Christians, don't be upset by what our speaker is saying. Nor the Hindus, please don't get upset or get angry. It's all a network of superstition, network of beliefs, hopes, born out of fear. We invent God. All that, the ceremonies, all the things that are in the churches, in the cathedrals, in the temples and mosques, are put together by thought. Nobody can deny that. And thought, as we pointed out, is a material process, because thought is based on experience, knowledge, memory, stored in the brain, and contained in the cells. Therefore, it is a material process. That which thought creates is nothing to do with sacredness. You may worship the things that thought has invented. You may worship your Guru and your scriptures, the Bible, the Quran, whatever books you read, so-called religious literature. But they are all the product of thought, not straight from God's mouth or horse's mouth. All that is not religion. Right? It's very difficult for most people to see this clearly. Because we always have hope in our heart for something which will give us strength, which will free us from our mortal travail. We want somebody to comfort us, the great Father up there. I'd love to tell you a good joke, but I won't, it's not the moment. So we want somebody to comfort us, somebody to tell us what to do, somebody to worship, somebody to cling to in our loneliness and despair. When we are shedding tears, we want somebody to hold our hand. And so, thought invents all these extraordinary illusions. that God, all the rituals, all the things you worship in temples and mosques and churches, is all the product of thought. And so we are saying all that is not religion. Would you see that? Not just intellectually, then it becomes a game, rather stupid game. But if you actually see that it has no meaning, it's a sense of deception, hypocrisy, that has nothing to do with our daily living. We have had every kind of God from the most ancient of time, prehistory. And these gods and their goddesses and their rituals have not changed the human brain, human brutality, human wars. You may worship your gurus, follow them, but you're not going to stop any war. You're not going to change your whole being. So we ought to inquire, what is religion? To inquire, one must be free of all superstitions. Naturally. From all authority. Will you do that? The authority of the book, the authority of tradition, the authority which you create for yourself based on your own experience. You understand all this? So that your mind, your brain is free from every kind of illusion. Is that possible? This man brain invents illusions, myths, growth, all the mythology of Greece, of ancient Egypt, and your own Christian and Hindu mythology, all the inventions of thought, superstar, and so we can the brain be actually free of all that? And the brain has been conditioned for centuries upon centuries through propaganda, through tradition, through books. What religion is. Will you be free of that? Not become an atheist, which is another reaction, but to have a brain that's completely free. That requires a great deal of investigation to oneself, a great deal of attention to every thought, every movement of action, so that your whole being is completely denuded of every kind of illusion. It is not easy because we don't understand the nature of desire. It is the desire for comfort, for some help. You understand? That creates the illusions. To desire illumination. That's what you all want. So we ought to investigate what is desire. You understand? We ought to inquire seriously, honestly, at least for this hour. Honestly, find out for yourself what is desire. While desire has made us what we are, fighting each other, competitive, hating each other. The desire for power. Power, whether it's political power, or the power of a priest, or the power of the image in the temple, the power of a husband over his wife, over his daughter-in-laws. You follow power. Having a man having great knowledge, it gives him great power. Power in any form is evil, ugly, brutal. And we all want power. Power means money. Money means freedom to do what you want to do. So one has to have a brain that is free from all authority and power. Will you do it? Will you study this? Will you go into it? Or you are just listening, spending an hour listening to something that is true and then forget it as you leave this place? That's what you're going to do. And therefore, you shouldn't be here if you are going to do that. Because that will act as a poison. Hearing something true and not living it. Then you have a conflict. And conflict destroys, degenerates the brain. So either don't listen, or listen with all your heart and mind, so that the word is the action. The two are not separate. So can you have a brain that's totally free from all tradition, all authority, including your own authority, which is having confidence in yourself, which gives you an authority. You understand, it's a very complex problem. The authority of the policeman, the authority of the government, the law, which we apparently disregard totally. The authority of taxes, is that all right, maybe? So, can your brain be free from all this? And that freedom is not a reaction. because you understand the nature of authority. You understand the nature of the tradition that is mere following, mechanically accepted, which degenerates the brain. You see that, and therefore you put it away. It's not a reaction. If you react, then you're back again into the old pattern. So then we can ask, what is religion? You understand? Only then you can find out. And that implies meditation. May I use that word? Because that word has been used by every kind of guru, the money makers of gurus, with their power position. They teach you, there are many schools in different parts of the world teaching you meditation, Tibetan meditation. Oh God, it all becomes sound so silly, all this. Tibetan, the Buddhist, the Hindu, Zen, and your own guru invents a particular form of meditation and you copy it. But you never inquire because you're too greedy to get something. You never inquire, what is meditation? What does it mean? Not how to meditate. If you ask how to meditate, then it's very simple. Do this and don't do that. Sit for 10 hours on your head, or stand on your head. Sit in a certain posture, breathe in a certain way, control your mind, thought. And who is the controller to control the thought? Have you asked that? Who is the controller when you want to control your thought in meditation, or when you're in business, or anywhere else? Who is the controller? Isn't he also part of thought? Right? Isn't he? So, controller, who is also thought, controls thought. You understand the game we play? So, what is meditation? The meditation that we do is born of desire. No? We want to achieve peace of mind. I don't know whatever that may mean. We want to achieve illumination. We want to reach nirvana. We want to become something. Right? That's part of meditation. Climb the ladder to heaven, which is climbing the ladder of success. Same thing, not much different. The man who's born a clerk wants to become a manager. You meditate in order to become what? God knows what. So you meditate. So, if you can put all that aside, what is meditation? find that out. Let's go briefly into what is desire. What is desire? What is the source of desire? How does desire spring from? Is desire born from the object perceived? I see a beautiful car. The seeing creates the desire, right? Let's go. And please, careful, don't agree what I'm saying. We're going to contradict all that presently. So don't be caught in a trap. Does the object create desire? I see a beautiful house and I want it. I see an extraordinarily intelligent, beautiful, decorative man head, and say, my God, I wish I had that. So we ought to inquire very carefully into what is desire. Not suppress desire. We are not saying suppress desire or give in to desire. Like the monks suppress desire and the others indulge in desire. So we ought together find out for ourselves, not be told. And the speaker is not telling you, for God's sake, he's not telling you. Find out what is desire. The object, a car, or a woman, or a beautiful tree, all that which you see in a lovely garden, the green lawn, the border of flowers, the scent of early morning, spring in a garden, you see all that. And you say, my God, I wish I had a garden like that. Don't you all want that kind of desire? Yes, sir. So, we are not suppressing or indulging, we are inquiring into what is desire. If one can understand the nature and the structure of desire, then you can deal with it. You see the car, I'm taking that silly example. You can take your own particular example. You see something, a mechanic, a car, a good watch. Seeing, that is visual, but seeing, then from that seeing, sensation, right? Right? From that sensation, what takes place? Contact is part of sensation, right? Then, just wait, then what takes place? Don't repeat it. If you have heard this before from the speaker, don't repeat it. Because then that means nothing. Repetition. I saw a parrot once. Beautiful parrot. Lovely creature. It was chattering away what the master had been talking about. And that's what you generally do, repeat. So please don't repeat. Then you become second-hand human beings without dignity. So, seeing, contact, sensation. Now, what takes place after that? Go very slowly. Find out. I see this very good watch, a friend of Dave, I see this in the window. I go inside, examine it, touch it, feel it, see the weight of it, who made it. And then what happens? Then thought comes in, creates an image. I would say, I wish I had it. That is, seeing, contact, sensation. Then thought immediately creates the image, right? And then that very second when thought creates the image of you in the car or you having that watch, at that second desire is born, right? Are we clear on this matter? At least intellectually. Now, if you see that, can there be an interval between seeing, contact, sensation? An interval before thought takes shape of it, makes a shape of it. You understand? You understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? An interval. Can we do it? It's all so rapid. So when you slow it down, like a motion picture, slow it down, then you see everything in detail. And that's desire. So extend the gap. Because you are desire. You are the very structure of thought and desire. So if you understand, if you look into the nature of thought and your reactions, you can slow the whole mechanism down very quiet, slowly. Or you understand this instantly. That requires attention, that requires passion to find out. So, let's go back to meditation. That is, if you have understood, not verbally, if you understand the nature and the structure of desire, then we can go back and find out what is meditation. Is conscious meditation meditation? You understand my question? Is it? Obviously not. If I consciously sit down for 10 minutes a day or 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon, 20 minutes in the evening, then it becomes a relaxation, siesta, nice, comfortable, enjoyable, go to bed. That's what it's called. I won't name it, you know all that business. So what is meditation? If you consciously meditate, It has a direction, a motive, a desire to achieve. Surely that's not meditation, is it? That's like becoming a clerk, becoming a manager. He's working, working, working. The two things are the same. They're not, you call that business, the other call it religious achievement. Both are exactly the same thing. Do we see that? Gentlemen, do you see it who meditate? Of course not. That means giving up your pet enjoyment, pet entertainment. So we are saying conscious meditation is no meditation. Because it's born of desire. Therefore, is born out of a desire to achieve, to become something, which is becoming, the self-becoming something. The self, the me becoming God. It sounds so safe. Forgive me for using that word. Then what is meditation? If it is not conscious meditation, then what is meditation? You understand? The word meditation means also to meditate, to ponder, to think over, and also measure, to measure. As part of the meaning of, root meaning of the word meditation, both in Sanskrit and so on. Now, can your brain stop measuring? You understand? I am this, I will be that. I am comparing myself with you. You are so beautiful, so your grace, your brains, you have got quality, depth, you are aesthetically living something extraordinary. I want that. You are measuring, which is comparison. Right? Can you stop comparing? Don't agree, stop comparing, find out what it means to live without a movement of comparison. So you understand? Love is not a reaction. Therefore it's free. Not to express what you want. That's a reaction. And freedom is part of that. Love. Where there is love, there is intelligence. Not born out of thought. Intelligence is something outside the brain. I won't go into all this too quickly, I'll just go into that compassion. Compassion. Love. Freedom is outside the brain. I know. I could go into, there is no time. Because the brain is conditioned, it can't contain this. So, meditation is not conscious, deliberate act. There's a totally different kind of meditation, which has nothing whatsoever to do with thought and desire. And that means a brain that is really, if I may use the word, empty empty of all the things that thought man has made. And where there is space, because this freedom means that, love means space, vast, limitless space. And where there is space, there is silence and energy. If your brain, if you are thinking about yourself all day long, which most of us are, then you have reduced the extraordinary capacity of the brain to such a small issue about yourself. Therefore you have no space. And so the brain, though it has its own rhythm, not the speaker is a specialist on brains, but he has lived a long time, studied a long time himself, watched others. Brain has its own rhythm that can be left alone. But when the brain is silent, not chattering, quiet, utterly, then there is that which is not measurable by words, that which is eternal, nameless.